It feels like we need a win for this country today. Let me tell you about the story of a gay wilderness survival trainer from rural America who managed to infiltrate the top two right-wing militia groups in this country for several years, spy on them relentlessly, take thousands of hours of recordings and their documents, and send them over to ProPublica while he manages to stay a vigilante mole in the militia groups. Best snow day ever. Now, if you want all the specifics, you need to read the article. This is just going to be the Fast and Furious Cliff Notes version because I am so entertained by this. Our story begins. In the story, he's called John Williams. John Williams was a gay man growing up in rural America. As you can imagine, his parents were not pleased with this. From a very early age, John Williams was not treated well. And eventually he turned to crime and consequently eventually was sentenced to prison for threats that he made. This is important because John Williams learned a lot while serving in time. He learned how to deal with the criminals. He also learned how to deal with the law enforcement, and he learned important skills of survival. He also had plentiful amounts of time to read, and he did so voraciously. After his time in prison, John Williams takes his natural affinity for survival techniques and turns it into an occupation. We don't have any pictures of John Williams, so if you're trying to create a mental image, think of someone that's a very intense personality type, like you'd have to be, to spend 40 days in the wilderness with only a pocket knife, eating squirrels and currants, and calling that a birthday treat to yourself. He could not be less alike, he and I. But fortunately for John Williams, these very specific sets of skills put him in a very unique position to train people that would take up with the top militia groups in this country. And everything was going well until January 6th, when John realized, hey, I may have trained some of these people and I'm not okay with that. These are not my ideals. In fact, if they knew I were gay, they would probably want to me. John makes a plan. He has an in with AP3, this militia group here. And he's like, I'm going to take as much information from these people. I'm going to shut them down from the inside. He doesn't work with law enforcement because he doesn't trust law enforcement. And the interesting thing about this is you're going to see with this expose how much of a link there is to law enforcement in this country, which I think we all feared and knew. But when the survivalist, when the guy who can spend 40 days in the woods with just a pocket knife tells you that the amount of connections he's found between militia groups and law enforcement is so disturbing that he wants to flee the country, that's not great. So everybody loves John. John is doing an amazing job training these people to eat dirt and survive in cold temperatures. Here in Peter Sinks, Utah, which apparently is one of the coldest spots in the contiguous United States, if you needed to know the geography of it all. John Williams did reach out to a lot of the mainstream media and had been for a while, and no one would respond to him except for this ProPublica author. So also that's concerning. John gets an in with Oath Keepers, the other major big right-wing militia group in this country. They have a new leader because the other one had to go to jail for his involvement in January 6th. The new one is a retired detective. John Williams goes and stays in his home. The man has a plaque on his wall about how hunting men is a great thing. Tons. This whole story is full of weapons that go pew pew. So John Williams is buddying up with the leader of Oath Keepers, a former detective, now retired. Kinch is his last name. John Williams tells Kinch, the leader of Oath Keepers, that they should continue their relationship with AP3, the other right-wing militia group. And John does this so he can keep eyes on both of them, which is very smart. And he's like, I can't be the one digging into all this. It's going to look suspicious. So he delegates like a king, and he finds a 19-year-old on probation and says, hey, son, if you want to be like me, I can teach you how, but you got to practice on people you know. And so he gets him to create all of these dossiers and bring them back to John Williams. So smart, right? So now John Williams has this like arsenal of information, but the problem is things are ramping up. In 2020, their membership numbers had dwindled, as you can imagine, because half of them went to jail. But by 2022, the numbers were rising, and they were planning for 2024. In fact, I believe the media referred to it as a potential renaissance for the movement if Trump were to be elected. So here we are. Consequently, the members in the group are getting really active, and they're beginning to threaten people like journalists, like doxing them and putting their information for the public to see. And John finds out about these threats And he's like, wait, I don't know what to do here, because is it really an imminent threat? Should I blow my cover for this? What do I do? There's a real moral and ethical dilemma here, because he's not attached to any law enforcement agency. So he doesn't have somebody over his shoulder telling him when he's got to bow out. So on various burner accounts, he sends emails to these people warning them ahead of time. He does this several times, but then he realizes the last time that he's probably pushed it a little far, because he's one of the only people that was involved. It was obviously going to be traced back to them. You know, they're on encrypted chats and emails. At some point, someone's going to figure it out. In fact, he's so paranoid now that it takes him hours to just go grocery shopping. He's convinced people are following him everywhere. He's like, I gotta dip. I can't do this anymore. So he drops off the grid and eventually comes to meet with this journalist, Joshua Kaplan, and tells him the whole story. But then he's going to go back underground, because he's like, my mission is to take these people out. So now every time they go to a meeting, they don't know if I'm going to be behind them waiting to betray them. And I fucking love that for them. And he uses a slur that I won't use, but he's basically like, and a gay man is going to do it to them. So that's even better. On the one hand, the militia people in this country, they're mad about everything and nothing all at the same time. We don't really know. We do know that they care a lot about their pew-pews and wearing army fatigues, I guess. They gotta blend in if they're gonna survive off the grid. I don't know who would want to do that, but okay, fine. And yes, there was a disturbing connection to law enforcement. There's also government attorneys and other politicians that are connected to these militia groups. So, I mean, it's like a potpourri of important people, and that's not great. But the documentation from John Williams shows that these group meetings are more like Verizon sale meetings than they are like militia meetings. They're talking about buzzwords they can include to entice people to join the militia. One of them said that they wanted to be the McDonald's of right-wing patriot militia groups. Really? Like, they went so far right that they come back around again. You know what I mean? Because when you pull away the buzzwords and you take apart the fabric of that, what's really left underneath? They don't have a whole lot of mission. They just like a lot of pew-pews and being out in nature and yelling at people. Not super enticing. So thank you to John Williams for that, and Joshua Kaplan for writing it all down and keeping me entertained, and for anyone who managed to stay through this entire video. Oh my God, it's going to have a 0% watch rate. TikTok's not going to show it to anybody. We needed this today.